CAE Advanced class, how are you? Excellent. All right, today's class, the same as last week, is going to be in two parts. Part 1 is going to be the listening on page 96, and part 2, the use of English, on page 97. Okay, so let's crack on and have a look at the first part on page 96. All right, do you have your books open? Let's go. So in exercise 1, before we do the listening exercise, okay, let's look at this text. All right, here we have a text and 3 questions, which we can't discuss, but I'd like you to think about. All right, I'm going to read the text and I'd like you to think about the 3 questions. All right, then I'll give you my answers and see if yours are similar or different. Okay, so are you ready? Good. History shows us that what we associate with one culture is often borrowed from another. For example, the Romans copied many ideas on architecture, literature, and art from the Greek civilization. But the Greeks, in turn, developed many of the things that they're most famous for from their nearby neighbour, Egypt. Egyptians not only built the pyramids, but revered literature and had the world's first library. They also excelled in the sciences and created geometry and astronomy. Through trade routes, much of this knowledge was passed on to the Greeks and the rest of Europe in turn. Right? So let's think of the 3 questions then. Number 1, how do you think ideas spread? And do you always know where an idea comes from? Number 2, what other art or ideas can you think of which have been copied around the world? And number 3, how much do you use other people's ideas for inspiration? Okay, so have a little think about it, press pause, then come back and listen to my answers and see if yours are the same or different. All right? Are you back? Okay, so first of all, how do ideas spread? Well, in the text it talked about trade routes and things like that, whereas I think nowadays it's much more about technology. Yep, ideas get spread on Instagram, Facebook for us oldies, okay, and things like that. Did you have the same as me? Yeah, right. Do you always know where an idea comes from? Now, this is where I think fake news comes in a lot. I think lots of things that we get ideas from nowadays, we don't know the original source. And so sometimes we don't even know if it's true or not. I suppose if it's, for example, a design or a picture, does that matter? Possibly not. Number 2 then, what other art or ideas can you think of which have been copied around the world? Well, the 2 that I can think of off the top of my head, number 1 is IKEA. So IKEA is the example of Scandinavian design. Yes, and IKEA is everywhere now. Does anybody have a house or a flat without something from IKEA in? Probably not. The second thing I thought of was democracy. Yeah, goes back to, is it ancient Greece, I think, who started with democracy, and we've taken that idea, and now that idea is all around the world. Number 3 then, how much do you use other people's ideas for inspiration? I am a total copycat. Totally. Okay? I get all of my inspiration from the internet. I'm not a creative person, particularly, so yeah, I need to use other people's ideas to help me out. How about you? Are you a copycat or do you think you're an original? All right. So let's move on to the actual listening task then. Okay. Now, in this part of the listening, you hear 3 different conversations and there are 2 questions to answer for each of the conversations. All right. Have a look at exercise 2. All right. I would like you to look at the 6 questions, the 3 conversations, and answer the 3 questions. So number 1, what is the topic of each conversation? Number 2, which conversations do you think might be formal and which might be informal? And finally, can you identify the key words in the questions? Okay, I'm only going to give you 30 seconds for this, so don't pause the video. Okay, 30 seconds, go. Okay, so let's go through them then, shall we? So the topic of each conversation. Well, conversation 1 is all about using ideas for inspiration. Conversation 2, the topic is signing a petition about ideas. And conversation 3 is about thinking collectively, so as a group, as opposed to individuals. Okay, now remember, in the real exam, the topic of the conversations will all be different. Okay, but in this exam task, the topics are similar to be the same as the topic of the class. Okay. Number 2 then, which conversations might be formal and which ones more informal? Well, conversation 1 might be more formal. It's on TV, radio, whereas conversations 2 and 3 are probably more informal because they're taking place between peers. Okay. And number 3 then, the key words in the questions. What did you think? So for number 1, we're looking at woman's attitude, ideas and others. For number 2, man surprised. Number 3, why, man start and petition. Number 4, woman's attitude, copying and ideas. Number 5, man believes, theory because. And finally, number 6, what, students agree and theory. Okay, fairly simple? Good. So before we do the listening task, look at the exam tip in the box for multiple choice. Okay, use the context sentence to think about the type of conversation and the information you expect to hear. So the context sentence is this little bit of information that you see before the question. All right. So look at the context sentence for conversation 1. And again, there's 3 questions. Who might be talking in a discussion program? If the speakers are talking about using other people's ideas, what words or expressions would you expect to hear? And finally, what might different views on this topic be? So again, don't pause the video. I'm going to give you 30 seconds to look at the context sentence and answer those 3 questions. Okay, 30 seconds, go. Okay, what do we think then? So, first of all, who might be talking in a discussion program? Well, probably an interviewer with an expert or a couple of experts, something like that. Number 2, if the speakers are talking about using other people's ideas, what words or expressions would you expect to hear? Well, you're listening for words that are related to copying, using, inspiring, things like that. And finally, in number 3, what might different views on this topic be? Well, differing views could be, for example, using ideas is okay and inspirational maybe, whereas other people might think that it's not okay, it's not fair, for example. All right, so this exam tip is basically telling you to look at the context sentence and think about what you're going to hear. All right, the more that you know you're going to hear before you listen, the easier it is when you listen to the exam task. All right, so that's all the preparation done. Are you ready for the exam task? Good. Now remember, you need to answer both questions for each conversation at the same time. Okay, sometimes the answer for number 1 will be first and the answer to number 2 will come second, but sometimes it's the other way. All right, so are you ready? Then let's listen.
Conversation 1. You hear part of a discussion program about using others' ideas for inspiration.
You know, almost every artist draws on other people's ideas for inspiration, and that's happened throughout history. And yet today, we seem to be obsessed with who owns an idea, don't we? But taking the nub of someone else's idea and building on it has always been part of innovation, hasn't it? I mean, you only have to think of all the ideas that have been traded around the world to see this.
Yes, I tend to agree. After all, ideas have no physical reality, so the borrowing or theft of an idea doesn't mean that the original creator cannot continue to utilize it. Yet it's astonishing that when we talk of the masses of music or movie downloads from the internet, the most frequently used word is piracy. I mean, if I use your idea, it'll lead me to create new ideas that you will eventually benefit from. How have we come to view ideas as if they had some physical existence that we can lock up behind a set of property rights laws that are very similar to those we use to protect our physical property?
Conversation 2. You hear a conversation between two friends about a petition against stealing ideas.
So anyway, I got so angry with news sites copying my videos that I've set up a petition. I'm asking all the artists I know to sign it and to pass it on to their friends. Everyone I know has been affected.
But you can't control that. I mean, if you put your stuff out there on video sharing sites, then of course someone's going to use it. I mean, is it copying if you just repeat what someone else has said?
It's not that. It's the fact that they deliberately trawl sites to mine them for ideas and then they never credit anyone. And they make money out of it. It undermines the hard work of independent artists, so we're trying to get them to use some of those funds to reinvest in us.
Well, I do sympathise, but I'm not sure how successful you'll be. Everyone remixes and reuses stuff, and I would say it's next to impossible to control that. But I do think we need artists to continue to put their ideas out there. Art has always relied on public view, and I don't think that should change. I guess it's just easier to copy stuff now rather than reproduce a master painting.
Conversation 3. You hear two students discussing a lecture on a theory about whether people think collectively.
Well, that was weird, wasn't it? Professor Jennings was quite convincing about this idea that it's normal for a whole society to all think the same thing at the same time.
In fact, I'm constantly thinking, oh, I wish I'd set up that business because I thought of that idea, but actually, it wasn't a new idea. Someone else had it at the same time. When I go to conferences, I always get frustrated because someone else has gone down exactly the same path as me on an idea, so it no longer feels original.
But I put that down to the fact we're all studying the same thing. I mean, the professor claimed that as humans, we have a collective memory, so that's why we all think alike at more or less the same time, especially if we're working in the same field. Mind you, I'm not sure you could ever really prove it.
He was saying, wasn't he, that it's a theory that appeals and makes sense to us, but when they tried to prove it, they couldn't. It makes sense intuitively.
It's complex, but even without the data, it does explain why we're all thinking the same stuff at the same time.
Okay, now remember, this is a Cambridge exam, which means we get to listen twice. Okay, now instead of repeating the listening here, you can just go back in the video and listen again. All right? Remember, even if you think you know exactly what the answer is, listen again to check your answers. Okay? And also, when you've listened the second time, if you don't have an answer for one of the questions, what should you do? Exactly. Put something. All right? There are no minus points in Cambridge. If it's wrong, you just don't get the point. But if it's right, woohoo! Points for everyone. Okay? So go back and listen again, and then we'll go through the answers. All right? Okay, are we on to the second time? Okay, let's have a look at the answers then. So, number 1, what is the woman's attitude towards using the ideas of others? The answer is B. Good. When it said taking the nub of someone else's idea and building on it has always been part of innovation, hasn't it? Number 2 then. What is the man surprised by? Here the answer is C. Number 3 then. Why did the man start the petition? The answer is C. Number 4, B. Number 5, A. And number 6, A. So, how did you do? Did you get them all correct? Excellent. Now remember, if you want to check, all right, you can look at the audio scripts in the back of the book. So the audio script for this one is 7.4, which is on page, let's find it here, can't open my book, which is on page 181. Okay, this one here, and you can look at the 3 conversations to check your answers. All right? Anyway, that's the end of page 96. So, the end of this video. Join me in part 2 when we're going to look at the use of English. All right? See you in a minute. Bye.